What a season it's been if you're a 49ers fan. On one hand, you're coming off a 12-5 campaign that honestly felt almost miraculous when you factor in the injuries, the adversity, and how many key players were in and out of the lineup. Kyle Shanahan and this coaching staff deserve real credit for keeping things on track, and if you're being honest with yourself, there were moments this year where it felt like the wheels could come off completely. Instead, this team found a way to win games, fight through chaos, and even steal a playoff victory when plenty of people had already written them off. But at the same time, that loss to Seattle still stings. It wasn't just another defeat. It felt like a reality check. It exposed some uncomfortable truths about where this roster really stands, especially when you line up against a physical, well-coached opponent that knows exactly how to attack your weaknesses. That game told us a lot about what the 49ers need to fix if they truly want to get back to the Super Bowl level. Before we go any further, if you live and breathe Niners football like I do, take a second to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We're pushing hard toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you helps make that happen. Plus, you won't miss any off-season breakdowns, rumors, or roster updates. Now, let me ask you something right away, because I'm curious where your head is at. Were you more impressed by the 12-5 turnaround this season, or more alarmed by how things fell apart against Seattle? Drop a quick comment with just one word, turnaround or wake-up call. I really want to see where Niners fans land on that. A huge part of the story this year was Brock Purdy battling through injuries and Mac Jones stepping in when the team desperately needed stability. Mac quietly went 5-3 and, let's be real, he saved the season. Without him, this could have been a completely different conversation right now. Instead of talking about playoff wins and off-season upgrades, we might be talking about a total collapse. That alone changes how you have to look at this offseason, because suddenly Mac Jones isn't just a backup quarterback. He's an asset. And that brings us to the big picture. The 49ers accomplished something impressive, no doubt about it. But they also showed you exactly where the cracks are. You saw it in the pocket collapsing too fast. You saw it in Brock running for his life. You saw it when the Seahawks controlled the line of scrimmage and basically dictated the entire game. That Seattle loss has to serve as a wake-up call for the whole organization. So here's a simple yes or no question for you. Do you think that Seahawks game proves the Niners have to overhaul the trenches this offseason? Just type yes or no in the comments. Because when you zoom out and look at everything together, one thing becomes crystal clear: this offseason isn't about small tweaks. It's about real changes. It's about deciding whether to cash in on Mac Jones. It's about getting tougher and meaner up front. And it's about figuring out how to close the gap on teams that are beating you where it matters most. And that's exactly where we're going next. Because if there's one area that keeps showing up every single year in these playoff losses, it's what's happening in the trenches. Let's talk about why the offensive line has become the #1 priority and what the 49ers realistically need to do to fix it. See if you've watched this team closely over the past few years, then none of what I'm about to say should really surprise you. The offensive line has quietly been the recurring problem in almost every major 49ers heartbreak. You can trace it back year after year, moment after moment, and it always seems to show up at the worst possible time. Think about it. In 2021, it was the Rams front that flipped the NFC Championship game and erased the late lead. In 2022, the Eagles led the league in sacks and completely overwhelmed San Francisco up front, whether Brock Purdy was in the game or not. In the Super Bowl against Kansas City, the offensive line struggled again against an elite defensive front. Then in 2024, the team slid to 6 wins with average at best line play. And now in 2025, you walk into Seattle and get flat out bullied in the trenches. That's not random. That's a pattern. Against the Seahawks, Seattle barely had to blitz. Let that sink in. They rushed for most of the time, yet their pressure rate was close to 50%. Brock Purdy spent the night running for his life, scrambling hundreds of yards just trying to survive behind the line. When that's happening, it doesn't matter how good your play design is. It doesn't matter how talented your receivers are. You simply cannot run a functional offense when defenders are in your quarterback's lap that fast. And this is where the philosophical problem comes in. For a long time, Kyle Shanahan has believed he could scheme around a shaky offensive line. Quick throws, motion, play action, creative run designs. And sometimes, that works. But at the highest level, against elite defensive fronts, you eventually hit a wall. You can't out-scheme brute force forever. So when people ask what the number one offseason priority is, for me, it's clear: center and left guard. That's where this has to start. You hope Trent Williams comes back healthy, because when he's on the field, he changes everything. At right guard, Dominic Pooney gave you solid snaps, and Colt McKivitz on a value deal has been pretty good bang for your buck. But the interior, especially center and left guard, has to be upgraded. Those spots got exposed, and Seattle showed every other team in the league exactly how to attack the Niners moving forward. This is where the front office has options. You can go the free agency route and bring in a proven interior lineman who brings some nastiness and leadership. Someone who isn't just technically sound, but who actually enjoys mixing it up. Or you can attack it in the draft, maybe grabbing a future tackle who starts his career at guard, or a natural center who can grow alongside Brock Purdy. Ideally, you do both. One veteran, one rookie. That's how you rebuild a line without putting all your eggs in one basket. And here's the bigger point. Fixing the offensive line doesn't just help the run game. It helps everything. It gives Brock Purdy cleaner pockets. It lets receivers develop routes downfield. It slows down opposing pass rushers. It keeps your quarterback healthier. It even makes your play calling more aggressive because you're not constantly worried about instant pressure. So let me throw this to you right now. If you were running the 49ers, would you rather spend on a proven free agent center or draft a young lineman and develop him? Type free agent or rookie in the comments. And if you want deeper dives on offensive line prospects, free agent fits, and mock scenarios, make sure you like this video. Seriously. If this one gets strong engagement, I'll put together a full OL breakdown next. And don't forget to subscribe as well. We're grinding toward 1,000 subscribers, and hitting that mark means a lot more detailed offseason content coming your way. But here's where it all ties together. Improving the offensive line costs resources. It costs cap space. It costs draft picks. And that brings us to the most fascinating wildcard of this entire offseason. Mac Jones. Because depending on what San Francisco decides to do with him, it could completely reshape how they attack these offensive line upgrades. Let's talk about Mac, his trade value, and why he might be the key to unlocking this whole offseason. Mac Jones might end up being the most important chess piece of the entire 49ers offseason. And that probably sounds crazy at first, but think about it. He wasn't supposed to be anything more than insurance. A safety net behind Brock Purdy. Instead, he stepped in, went 5-3, stabilized the offense, and quite literally saved the season. Without Mac Jones, the Niners don't go 12-5. They don't make the playoffs. And Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are having very different conversations right now. That matters. Because now Mac isn't just a backup quarterback. He's a proven stopgap who can win games in the right system on a team-friendly contract, in a league that suddenly looks pretty thin at quarterback. That combination creates leverage. Right now, Mac is under contract for about $7 million next season, which is incredibly reasonable for a quarterback who just kept a playoff team afloat. Shanahan has publicly said they expect him to be back. And that makes sense. Quarterback security is real. Brock Purdy has dealt with injuries, and having a reliable number 2 behind him is valuable. But here's the other side of it. This quarterback market is weak. The draft class doesn't have much depth. A lot of college quarterbacks decided to go back to school. Free agency isn't exactly overflowing with dependable starters. And when supply is low, prices go up. That's why you're hearing trade buzz. If a desperate team comes calling and offers something like a second-round pick plus a third-round pick for Mac Jones, that's no longer an easy decision to turn down. That's premium draft capital. That's the type of return that could directly fund your offensive line rebuild or help restock a wide receiver room that badly needs youth and speed. So you're basically choosing between stability and flexibility. Keep Mac Jones, and you have one of the better backup quarterbacks in football. You protect yourself if Brock misses time again. You stay competitive no matter what. Trade Mac Jones, and suddenly you have multiple high picks to attack center, guard, receiver, or even future defensive depth. That's how you accelerate a retool instead of slowly patching holes. Let me ask you straight up. If you were sitting in John Lynch's chair, would you trade Mac Jones for a second and a third? Vote in the poll, and drop your reasoning in the comments. I want to hear how you'd play it. Now, if the Niners did move Mac, there's also the idea of the reclamation quarterback. This organization has built a reputation for that. You bring in a talented but struggling player, sit him behind Brock Purdy, let him learn Shanahan's system, and see what happens. Names like Zach Wilson and Anthony Richardson get brought up for that reason. Zach Wilson has a big arm and mobility. Anthony Richardson is an elite physical specimen. Malik Willis is another name people mention, especially with his flashes in relief duty. Even Aaron Rodgers gets tossed around, though that feels more like wishful thinking than reality. The common thread with all of them is raw talent. But Shanahan values one thing above almost everything else at quarterback: accuracy. You can be big, fast, and strong, but if you can't consistently complete passes in rhythm, the offense stalls. That's why Mac Jones, for all his limitations, still carries value. He's accurate. He runs the system. He keeps things on schedule. So again, it comes back to philosophy. Do you prioritize quarterback security, knowing how fragile seasons can be? Or do you cash in on max value while it's high and use those picks to build a tougher, younger roster around Brock? And while you're thinking about that, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We're chasing that 1,000 subscriber goal, and once we hit it, I'll start rolling out deeper trade scenarios and mock off-season builds. Hit like on the video too if you enjoy these breakdowns. It really helps the channel grow. But here's the thing. Roster moves aren't the only factor this offseason. There's another storyline hovering over the organization that could impact free agency, player perception, and even long-term health. It's uncomfortable. It's controversial. And it's something the 49ers can't afford to ignore. Let's talk about the substation issue and why it matters more than a lot of people realize. See, this next part of the conversation is a little different, but it's just as important as anything we've talked about so far, because it could directly affect who wants to play in San Francisco. You've probably heard about it by now. The electrical substation near the practice facility. At first, it sounded like one of those internet theories that would fade away in a week. But it hasn't. Players have talked about it. Media outlets have picked it up. Even people outside of football are discussing it. And when something reaches that level of awareness, perception starts to matter almost as much as reality. Here's the key point: the 49ers have been one of the most injured teams in the NFL for more than a decade. At some point, you can't just chalk that up to bad luck. Players inside the locker room have voiced concerns. Christian McCaffrey has mentioned it. Kyle Juszczyk has said he wants studies done. Former players like Delaney Walker and Logan Ryan have talked about it. Current players have acknowledged it's been a topic behind the scenes for years. And according to reports, even NFL agents are now saying that clients have reached out asking about it, wondering if this could impact their careers. That's a big deal. Because free agency is coming. And if even a small percentage of players hesitate to sign with the Niners because they're worried about long-term health, that puts San Francisco at a disadvantage. In a league where talent acquisition is everything, you can't afford to have an extra obstacle in your way. So what do the 49ers do? First, they have to take it seriously and be transparent. That means funding legitimate studies, sharing results with players and agents, and showing that they're willing to explore every possible cause of these injury trends. Training staff, strength and conditioning, practice routines, field conditions. Everything has to be on the table. Second, they need to be proactive, not reactive. Even something as simple as temporarily moving practice fields or adjusting schedules could send a powerful message: player health actually comes first here. And third, this becomes a business decision as much as a football decision. This is a multi-billion-dollar franchise. Injuries hurt competitiveness, but they also hurt the brand. They affect negotiations. They impact recruiting. When your own players are publicly asking for studies and solutions, you can't just wait for the story to disappear. Let me throw this to you. Do you think this substation story could impact which free agents decide to sign with San Francisco? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you were Jed York for a day, what's the very first action you take to reassure players? Would you fund independent research? Move practice locations? Overhaul training staff? Let me know your idea. If you want updates on this as it develops, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on. I'll keep tracking anything official that comes out, and we'll break it down together. Because when you zoom out, this offseason is about more than just signing players and drafting prospects. It's about rebuilding trust, improving toughness, and creating an environment where players actually want to come and stay. Which brings us to the final piece of this puzzle. We've talked about the trenches. We've talked about Mac Jones. We've talked about perception and health. Now let's pull it all together and map out what a realistic, prioritized 49ers offseason should actually look like if this team wants to take the next step. Alright, let's bring everything together, because when you zoom out and look at this offseason as a whole, the path forward for the 49ers is actually pretty clear. It starts up front. Priority number one has to be the offensive line, specifically center and left guard. Nothing else works the way it's supposed to until that gets fixed. Brock Purdy needs cleaner pockets. Christian McCaffrey needs real running lanes. The receivers need time to get into their routes. Whether that comes through free agency, the draft, or ideally a mix of both, the Niners have to add tougher, more physical bodies in the middle of that line. This can't be another year of hoping scheme will cover up weaknesses. Second, they have to make a firm decision on Mac Jones. If the right trade offer comes in, something like a second-round pick plus another asset, you seriously have to consider it. That type of draft capital could immediately accelerate your rebuild on offense. But if no team meets that price, keeping Mac as one of the league's best backup quarterbacks isn't a bad outcome either. The key is being intentional. Don't drift into a decision. Pick a direction and commit. Third, this offense needs to get younger, faster, and more explosive. Right now, the 49ers are one of the oldest offenses in football. Christian McCaffrey is approaching 30. George Kittle is coming off a major injury. And while guys like Juwan Jennings have been incredibly clutch and easy to root for, there's a real possibility he prices himself out of San Francisco. If his number climbs north of about $15 or $16 million per year, you probably have to walk away. That's tough emotionally, but this team needs speed and youth, not just familiarity. Wide receiver and interior offensive line should be major focus areas. Early in the draft and free agency, you need players who can grow with Brock Purdy over the next several seasons, not just fill short-term gaps. Fourth, defensively, the Niners are actually in a better spot than a lot of people realize. Nick Bosa coming back changes the entire pass rush. Fred Warner is still one of the best linebackers in football. Young guys on the defensive line have a chance to take a step forward. The biggest move here is making the right defensive coordinator hire. Whether it ends up being someone like Raheem Morris, Jim Schwartz, or Gus Bradley, the goal is simple: maximize Bosa, improve run defense, and let the secondary benefit from consistent pressure up front. And finally, they have to address the substation situation head-on. That means transparency. That means studies. That means being willing to adjust practice locations if needed. Even if the impact turns out to be minimal, showing players and agents that you're taking their concerns seriously matters. Free agency is competitive. You don't want perception to become a deal breaker. So here's the full roadmap in simple terms: fix the offensive line, decide on Mac Jones, inject youth and speed into the offense, hire the right defensive coordinator, and clean up any off-field concerns that could scare players away. Do that, and this team is right back in the Super Bowl conversation. Now I want to hear from you. Out of everything we talked about today, what would you make priority number one this offseason? Offensive line, Mac Jones, wide receiver, or something else entirely? Drop your ranking in the comments. And one last yes or no before you go. Do you think the 49ers will come out of this offseason better than they went in? Type yes or no. If you enjoyed this breakdown, help the channel out by liking the video and subscribing. We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single click helps bring more detailed Niners content your way.